Okay. The recording has started. Hi, everyone. I'm Kaan. I'm from the Ryzen team, and this is the Andromeda workshop and Q&A session. Uh, our guest is Leif. Uh, he's going to talk about Andromeda, and he's going to show us how to do ADOs and dApps on Andromeda's app. And then after the 45 minutes of a workshop, we can do a quick Q&A session so that you can ask anything that comes into your mind. Yeah, I mean, Andromeda is a really cool product. It's a decentralized operating system that makes it possible for you to build apps. And the Andromeda app is like a no-code builder. And uh, I mean, I personally love no-code builders because I don't like to write codes in my spare time. So that's really a match made in heaven for me. So yeah, back to you, Leif. I mean, you can start whenever you want.
Sounds good. I'm also here with Angela. I don't know if you wanted to do any personal introductions before we kicked off, Angela, or not. That's up to you. I'm happy to roll when we're ready.
Yeah, I think we can do a brief intro. I see people still rolling in, so that'll give us a couple more minutes too. So I am Angela Brazington, Chief of Ecosystem at Andromeda, and I work alongside Leif and our amazing tech team. And Andromeda is, as Khan said, it's a decentralized operating system. And there's a lot more to that Leif is going to open up for you today. And I'm really excited for you guys to actually see, and hopefully you have your computers open and you can get your hands on and maybe walk through or take notes, because I think I did this myself and I'm not as experienced as I hear some of you guys are from a developer standpoint. And I was able to build my own app and I was pretty excited about that. So I think once you, with your experience, get your hands on AOS, Andromeda Operating System, alongside Leif here, he's a great teacher. He's the one who taught me. I'm really excited to see what you build, and I want your feedback too. So as much feedback as you can give us or give to Khan and the Ryzen team, that's really helpful for us to be able to give you more and provide more and see what it is you want to build. And Leif, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, that sounds great. And I definitely appreciate everybody that's here, and I appreciate the invitation to be here. I wanted to start out with a couple of things. I think, as mentioned, we'll do a Q&A at the end of this session. Feel free to make some notes in chat. We can kind of keep track of that in case that needs to be something that comes up. So if you are one of the forgetful types and you aren't sure that you're going to remember by the end of it, or you want to make sure that it gets some attention, we'll do that. In addition to most everything that we look at today, you don't have to remember it exactly, and you don't have to remember exactly what I show you. I'm going to provide you with a lot of resources where you can actually dive into these things yourself, get more information. If there are any questions that come from the chat, I'll encourage one of the other team members to just kind of call that out if I kind of get in a roll, but it's something important to address. Please feel free to go ahead and interrupt, and I can kind of jump in, because we don't want anybody feeling left out. But I do want to encourage you that it's okay if you feel like something's not totally clear or you're not sure exactly how something works. As we look through some of these resources, you'll see that I'm doing my best. My team's really paid a lot of effort to try and make sure that this process and everything involved is a little more cleanly explained and easy for you to take on your own. So you have the advantage of having a little bit of a guidance in what we're going to go through today. And I'm going to try to kind of give us some real world examples and kind of at least make some basic introductions. At the completion of this process, we should have been able to get through a general build, unless I have some technical problems, which sometimes happens, but been pretty lucky here, so fingers crossed. But we'll go through a build and we'll actually see. I'll start us out by getting an idea of what we're trying to create, and then walk us through the steps, introducing the different pieces for that, and then I'll give you some additional information for further resources and some other things that we have going on here at Andromeda as well. So with that kind of preamble, I want to make sure that I just kind of give a brief introduction on a more technical level. I will be a little bit more technical today. And so hopefully I think that's correct for this audience, but feel free to interrupt if I'm getting a little too technical. In general, we founded Andromeda under the idea that we wanted to make the development and use of Web3 solutions easier, better, and faster. And I think for those of you that are already familiar with blockchain development processes, you know that there's headaches, it's intimidating, there's a lot to learn. And there are a lot of kind of steps in the process that can be kind of annoyingly long in taking on. So for those of you that already work in that space, I think there's going to be a few things that we look at today that you're going to go, hey, that's really nice. Small, simple things that are just kind of a good inconvenience or something that are a concern. For those of you that are not smart contract developers, we totally have you covered in the sense that we're really trying to make this process as optimized and streamlined as we can. So you won't have to worry about a smart contract development process. Are we good there? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just get us going here. I'm going to start out by kind of introducing you where you can get some resources and information, more about Andromeda, how it works, the base systems, and I'm going to probably close this out on our more technical end, but I have resources for that if they come up in Q&A, and we can always do follow-up. Then we're always available to be reached at our public networks if you wind up with questions later. So I want to first just introduce the Andromeda protocol.io is a great launching point for you to get more information about Andromeda, our AOS, what we're doing. We have a specific section for Learn, which gets you a lot of information just in the overall of who we are. But also just starts to introduce that. You'll see that we have general introductory videos, some breakdowns. If you get into our YouTube video, we've got guides and tutorials and other resources to try and help you along in a non-written format. And so I think it's a great way to get an introduction to what we're doing. We're working on a multi-chain distribution of smart contract solutions. And there's a variety of different technical levels that you can engage in that. You'll also find the resources for getting into the guides, our documentation, connecting with the community. So you can generally get to answers or things that you need in that sense. There are some general FAQ options here as well. If you've got some standard FAQ questions, feel free to explore there. So that's a great starting point to get an overall kind of standing of where we are. For those on the more technical side, we actually have a really robust set of documentation, which are available at docs.andromedaprotocol.io. This is my guide, so I'll just go ahead and do it this way. And in our setup here, this is going to be more technical. We've got the base introductions, and we've tried to break these things down into some different areas and formats that are most relevant. Some of these can get highly technical, and some of these are just kind of good introductions. But we start out by explaining the platform and the framework. We start talking about our digital objects. For the purpose of at least introduction, you can think of these as smart contracts. We have a logic library, and we'll take a look at that, and I'll walk through the explanation of what that is. But it's got a lot of various introductory pieces in it, and we've broken those out in the technicals. I'll also show you how to directly reference this documentation from within the web application. We have some guides to walk through different setups. And so today we're going to look at the web app, and that's going to be our no-code building solution in the web application. We also have a CLI that's available, and I'll touch base on that probably initially just to kind of let you see where that's at and how you can get more information. So the docs also provide more information about that as well. And we have additional resources available. For those of you that are looking for something that's really a lot more robust and really want to get into the ins and outs of the kind of the vision of the system, we have a full white paper 2.0 that we've released. It's close to 50, 60 pages, really breaking down the vision, talking a lot more about the various components, what we anticipate. We've already brought a lot of that forward here. We did the release of our developer preview last month on the 15th. And we've been rolling out some mainnet releases here since then. So there's a lot of information if you're really looking for the deep dive. We also have a tokenomics paper and some other materials if you're trying to kind of get a feel for that. So I wanted to get an introduction to the overall system for you guys and at least let you know where you can get going with that if you're looking for that. Today, we're going to specifically focus on the web application. And I'm going to kind of walk us through a rundown on this. And I just wanted to kind of point this out. I started off with the beginning saying, we've tried to make this so that you don't necessarily need someone to guide you. You can self-guide. We have a full set of information guides specifically for the web application. You'll find that when you come and log into the application at app.testnet.andromedaprotocol.io. We do have the app.andromedaprotocol.io, that's mainnet version, and we'll see there's a toggle option. We're going to be working in testnet today because we don't want to work with real funds while we try and test build. So I would encourage you all to go to the testnet version. There's a faucet and other things that are available there. But we start out with the option to learn first, and that'll get us a build out for our guides. Our guides have the general introductions kind of to introduce you to the web app that we'll look at today. We talk about the different sections and what their main purposes are. We give you some of the basic learning sets. If you're a little more familiar or a little new and unfamiliar with Web3 technologies, we've at least tried to get you a better understanding of where that works. As a clarification, we work in the COSM-WASM ecosystem. So all the development that we're doing is going to be in the COSM-WASM chains. When we start looking at some of the multiple chain selection options, things like that, we're within the COSM-WASM space. So if you're coming from Ethereum or another space, just know that it's going to be a little bit different what your options are. There are some great technological reasons that we do that, but it's probably beyond the scope of the conversation for today. Additionally, we have a full set of guides that we have. And these are all progressive. So even what we're working on today is going to be one of our use cases. But we've made a progressive guide kind of walking you through how to use the web app, introducing the different systems, giving you the values to put in. So this is the reason you don't need to remember the exact values that I give you today, because we go through our 4 primary use cases, starting at the most simple side, developing an app, extending that with a NFT collection, sending that off to a build, and a couple other things that I'll contextualize for you here in a sec. But I wanted to let you know, like, there's a full set of guides to go through that. There's extended functionality guides. And by the time that you generally get to the end of that, you'll have a very good familiarity with both the systems, the way that they work, the general areas to address, and that you'll note as we go through this build, there's a lot of functionality that's capable outside of what I'm going to be illustrating in these guides. So we've made that a progressive, easy to step through process that gets you really familiar with what we're doing so that you can go in and custom configure and custom build these things in the way that you want. So that's accessible from the get-go, and also is accessible once we get into the application. So if we say we want to start building, at the top section is the learn, and you can always kind of go and reference that if you ever need something. We'll also show how you can get access to the docs specific for what we're building here in just a little bit. Before I go into all the ins and outs, and I'm going to come right back here so that we can kind of do some basic introductions, but I wanted to make quick note. I had noted about the CLI. So we do have a CLI which can perform the majority of everything that we're going to be looking at today. So if you're a keyboard cowboy and prefer, the CLI is there and can support you with that. So that's available for reference, and you can find that there within the application. Quick and easy to get to. So let me just give you a quick example of what it is that we might be trying to construct here today. I mentioned in those guides we have 4 primary use cases. And essentially what those are is 3 of them are based off of NFT collections, and 1 of them is based off of a standard token collection. Since we're in COSM-WASM, for those that are familiar with the standards, there's going to be a CW721 for NFTs and a CW20 for tokens. For those of you that don't know what that means, that's okay. We do introduce those in the guides and make sure that you understand, the more technicals behind it, but realistically, we'll see it in reference as we build today. But we've created a system, so we've got a final end product where essentially we can build a web application that's been powered by the smart contract systems that we'll deploy today. And of the 4 use cases, my starting one here being an auction, which is probably what I'll work on today. And essentially what I've done is I've created an app, I've minted an NFT, and I've sent it into our auction. And it has a facilitation to be connected to this web application, and all of the things that empower the functionality for making a sale using the NFT is actually run on chain. And this is really just a front end reference. And as we can see, I've had this one And we have information about it. I can look at the properties based off of the metadata that's stored with it. These are kind of the standards if you're familiar with the NFT space, and we can kind of note what that is. If you're not familiar, we have guides. We'll help along that process. But essentially, we have an auction allowing that NFT to be sold to the highest bidder within the duration of what we have, and you come in and place those bids. So use case one being an auction. Additionally, in a similar setup of what we did and what we'll see today for the auction, we also have a marketplace. So here I've added multiple NFT collections with multiple NFTs, each one selling at a different cost for configurations and other things. So as I dive into those and load those up, just give it a sec to load, you'll see that instead of being at a high for sale at the highest bidder, there's a general standard price, which we can purchase at that value price. And it has the same sort of information. This is all pre-configured and set up. I'll talk about that here in a moment. We also have a crowd fund, and this essentially is a collection of NFTs. And what it facilitates for you to do is to put up those NFTs into the crowd fund with a general crowd fund goal within the time frame. If you meet your pledge goal, then the NFTs are distributed to all of the participants, and the funds are sent to the crowdfund host. If not, then all of the NFTs are burned and every participant is refunded their money. Now, all of that is all being handled by the smart contract solutions on chain that we'll deploy with the system. And my final example is just a simple token. Here, we're just doing an exchange, allowing you to buy a CW20 token for a native token price here at 50,000 AMDR. So it's a simple token exchange that you can self-host and you have your own custody of and everything like that. I won't go into too much detail right now. We'll see how many questions we have at the end and what we have for time. But as a note, each one of these, all of these, those are all available on our GitHub. They're all open source. So you'll be able to pick those up from our github.com/Andromeda protocol. We've got a section there for our SDK, which is Andromeda.js, and it handles all the chain-to-chain communications for us. And in addition to that, we have a base starter template built out in Next.js. So using React, you can customize that with Tailwind or with Chakra UI, whatever your preferred setup is. But we've already pre-configured this base starting template that handles the SDK. It handles the wallet systems for us, and also GraphQL references. So all of the configurations and data pulls that we're doing are all there. You can get your own copy of that to custom build that. And host that yourself externally if you would like. And we do have all of the examples that I just mentioned to in the embeddable marketplace demo repo as well. So those 4 example builds are also available there if you want them for the reference or if you want to self-host. As we get into the build, you'll see that we'll be able to run a quick setup. So I'm going to jump into the web app and keep an eye on time. I think I'm looking pretty good. I'm going to do a quick introduction to how does that work? How do we make smart contract solutions to power those web apps that we were just looking at? And so I'm going to go initially here into an empty project just to give us an understanding of what we're actually looking at. Now, we're putting all of the components, or we had referenced to the ADOs, our deployed smart contracts that come out of our logic library. We put them within a container, which we call an app. The app not only gives us organizational abilities and has an ability to be nested, so you can have multiple nested structures, but it also extends some of the functionality available for each one of the components that we put in there. So we have sibling-to-sibling communications, as well as parent-child communications, and we're able to start using referencing and labeling to increase that. We have some inheritance that comes from our base system, so there's functionality available. And that all comes from our logic library. When I click this Add App Component, it gives me the general selection of what we have within our library. We've outlined 16 primary ADOs of different types and different functionality that are all available to be loaded up and used. Each one of these has a different either data storage method or an action or activity that is specific to it, but they're all designed to be composable, so we can actually add these different ones in together. We can reference them to each other, and we'll see an example of that in progress, so that we can extend the functionality of a base system or or add extra data storage options, and a variety of other configurations. This logic library is also designed to be community contributive. It's an open source build, and we actually have incentivization programs so that other community members can come in and make developments and make submissions to get these in here. Of the 16 that I have, we have these audited and they're out on a mainnet. We have auditing partnership agreements as well. So those contributors that come in and submit to the ALL are also able to expand this library. So although we will continue to be adding to this library, we're also going to be calling on the community of smart contract developers to be assisting us in helping grow this out. So that means that you're not just stuck with what we build for you. This is something that the community can really rally behind and start creating. And so of this kind of collection of different things, all I have to do, I'm going to work on an auction set. So I'll give us a basic introduction. I'm just going to pick one out, and then I'll tell the story about what we're trying to do, and then we'll kind of walk through that. But so each one of those components, we said there's 16. As I add that in, the development process for an auction now is simply to load up this panel. And this panel gives me a small configuration option of what I need to configure in order to deploy a smart contract online that handles auction sales. These are NFT-based auction sales. But so we wind up in this really simplified solution where you don't have to worry about the smart contract code development, the deployment. We're going to handle all of that side for us. And instead, you can focus on the configurations and setups that you want to do for what you're trying to accomplish. So anytime that we're loading something out of the logic library, we go through that general process. Every panel we see is going to be enabled with a general series of different configuration options. So we can duplicate that panel, we can remove the one we have. And I want to note this, we have additional import and export functionality on the side. So if you're always reusing a configuration, if you want to share your configuration with other people, you can actually download the configuration that you have in a JSON format. You can re-import it. We'll see what that looks like here in a minute. And you can always find documentation for wherever you are in the system simply by opening up that menu and hitting documentation. Since we're looking at the auction instantiation, it's going to bring us to the auction and provide us the information directly in the docs. And we can actually get a much more technical review of the format types, the descriptions, and other information that we see there. And so that's always available no matter where you are in the operations of the system. And so if you're starting to get lost, you can always look at the documentation. And so I'll come back to it here, but I just wanted to illustrate again. So we're going to be making an auction. I'm going to use the CW721. I mentioned that's our NFT collection where we mint our NFTs and where those are stored. So I can just do a quick search, find that, and I can load that up. And it works in the same way. We have different fields of information that we need to configure in order to set up a collection. And we're going to do that here in just a minute. We'll set up a collection and walk through the process of actually setting up an auction ADO, auction app, and link that up. So just as a quick reference to what I'm trying to do, we talked about what that build was. Say I've come in, I've done that configuration. We talked about I can save data for each panel. I can also save that directly for the whole configuration that we're doing. That's available for a file you can download. You can also use it as a URL. So I can copy that URL, send it to you, and you can open it up and have your configuration of this. We also have a direct export to our CLI. So if you wanted to build this out, but you didn't want to post through a web browser because you feel that's insecure, you can directly copy the full build out, send it to the CLI, and post from there. I won't go into the app builder just yet because we're not at that level yet, but let's start over by coming in and saying, if we got an idea that that's the way that we construct an app, we add in those components, well, we could go through that step-by-step process and add those things in, but we also have templating structures. So we can actually make pre-configured setups that are already developed for people to come in and use. So we had talked about our 4 initial use cases, our auction, our flat rate marketplace, the crowdfund, and the CW20 exchange that we saw there. I've also got a couple other examples here as well to work with, but for the example of the auction, so we're going to have an auction configuration option. By clicking this, let me actually go back and let's take a quick look just of it in the App Store. We can come in and take a quick look. We can see the compatibility, what it's related to, and the information about it. I'm going to go ahead and just open that up again. And we can see that it's already loaded up the required panels that we need to have. It's also given names to these systems. And I want to make a quick note because these names are important. Here it's called tokens. This can be edited to say token instead. These name references now allow us to communicate with the different parts using our virtualized file system by plain name references. For those that are familiar with the smart contract deployment solutions, you'll know that you very commonly are operating solely in the deployed contract addresses. But now as we do these references, we're actually able to come in and communicate specifically by these names. So if I come into the auction, you can see here it was already configured for tokens, but I can now reference it in the same way as we might in, say, Unix, where the dot operator with a / would mean here in my present directory. So I'm saying here within the app that I'm in, I want you to talk to the token ADO. I want you to talk to that. I'm going to be authorizing it as one of the ones to be sold in auction. As I updated that, it gave me a scroll to linked panel. It's giving confirmations on chain that that's connected. And if I click that, it should take me up to that actual token that we built. So here we've got a base build with our NFT token and our auction. The NFT collection allows us to mint the NFTs. And then what we're going to do is we're going to deploy this build with the NFT collection and the auction. We can then mint an NFT in the collection. We'll send it over to the auction with some configuration information about the sale. And then we're going to connect it to the web app and give it the small configuration saying, hey, we're going to release an auction and we want you to talk to this NFT collection and this auction to power the web application that we're building. So I can likely just run through this quickly instead of, if I wanted to, I'll show us real quick just what that looks like. I can come in and load the saved file. So this is a previous build example that I had. It's going to have that same information. It's called auction tokens. I've called this auction example. It's got a previous address and a couple other things that are there. So this build can be deployed on any of the chains that we support. And I want to talk a bit about that because we're going to talk about how do we get connected to the wallet. The guides will walk you through if you're not familiar with Kepler. We have the Kepler wallet extension here, and I have that currently connected to my presentation wallet. It's got some general balances available. So when I connect the wallet, it's going to give you the terms and conditions. And of course, you should always read those before you agree and sign them. And then it's going to give me a selection of which chains I want to be working with. Now, keep in mind, we're in the testnet version. So there is the difference between the testnet and mainnet. I'll start here with our chain, which is our Andromeda testnet. It's our Galileo 4. If it's your first time, it'll give you a prompt from the Kepler window asking if you would like to use that chain. But you can see that selection option. The wallet's now connected here. I can see the address. I can copy out this address if I want. I can get information about it from the Explorer as well. But you can quickly toggle between any of the chains you want. So we could build this out. And as long as you swap out your addresses, you can deploy this on any of the chains that you want. So there's reusability in these as well. We're not going to go into the cross-chain features today, but the cross-chain, multi-chain options are something that is also built into these systems. So as a quick run through, I'm just going to tell a quick story and then we'll get the configs done and we'll see what this build is. So those of you that can see over my shoulder, I've got a little painting here. This is a painting of Bindo Altaviti. It's by the artist Raphael. And so for this story, I'm kind of working on the idea that maybe we as a collective group are a collective who's been charged with the restoration and preservation of the arts. And what we want to do is we actually want to sell this piece off to the highest bidder to help raise funds in order to go continue our efforts in the restoration preservation of the arts. I find giving a little bit of context so that when I'm entering this information, you can understand why we're entering this information is hopefully helpful. But essentially, we've added in this build and we've wound up with a setup here that has an NFT collection and the auction, as we discussed before. I'm going to do some quick configurations. Let's just call this demo example. Let's call it auction demo example. So this is going to be the container. We'll see it in the build after this, and it'll be called auction demo container. The minter address is who is allowed to mint NFTs. Now I've copied this address from here. I can quickly reference that here. You can list it and copy it there if you want. But I'm going to be giving my wallet the access to mint NFTs. And I've already populated this because we imported this information. But if I hadn't, I would be saying, what is the name of my NFT collection? And then similar to, say, a ticker report for MSN and other things like that, we can also give it a symbol. And we're just going to call it auction as our quick note. Now, our auction, which is named auction, we want to authorize a CW721 address, an NFT collection, to be sold there. If we don't specify one, then anyone could sell NFTs using that auction. We want to be explicit and say this is only for us. We don't want any other ones in there. So I'm going to just add in a new address. As I referenced before, I can actually bring it in from the ones that we have set up, and I have one called auction tokens. So I can select that. It's going to check, and now we can see that it's linked up there to the auction tokens ADO. Additionally, we support native funds, so the funds of the chain. We also do support CW20 as well. For our purposes, we'll work with native, and I'm not going to add in any modules. So this is a real simple, basic build. As I said, you could download that now if you wanted to come back to it, but I'm going to go ahead and publish, and I believe that I should be able to get through that. We always simulate the transaction, so if there's a failure, it'll occur before you've made any payments. So since we've simulated it, and I know what this general price is going to be at, I now can feel pretty confident that it's going to be able to broadcast onto the chain. And we're going to wait. It's going to give me a transaction notice. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'll give it an approval. And this is essentially now a time where it's broadcasting out and letting us kind of get that information to the chain to be posted. Now we have the transaction details and things. If we wanted to pull that up in the Block Explorer and take a look at that, we can. I'll also show you how we can reference that later, so it's not as necessary. Now, one of the things to note when we close this out, it's going to bring us into our asset system. And one of the things to note is that with chain, you have a consensus method. So sometimes there's a small delay between the publication and when it gets listed. We also are indexing all of the ADOs for you as well. So our indexing service waits until consensus is met and then starts loading this up. Now, each one of these are kind of all pre-built. But if I refresh now, I've probably talked long enough, we can see this auction demo example that we just built, and it's out there on chain. I can get more information about it. As you see, as I hover over these different sections, these buttons come out. If I look at the eye, it's going to pull up the information about that. If I need to look in more technical details about the deployed app or the ADO component, I can also see that transaction that we just had there if I needed to go look at a Block Explorer as well. But we also see now each one of those ADOs that we developed or that we configured are now listed in here with the auction tokens and the auction. We can see that height. We can look at the information specific to it as well and any transactions that have happened. This is our instantiation. So in the process of trying to take this picture, get it out onto a web app, I'm going to want to mint an NFT in my CW721 auction tokens. And so these menu options that we see are specific to the type of ADO and specific to the actions related to it. We do have some inherited ones that are available for all of them, but here are queries that are available to be run against a CW721, and here are all the ones that can be run against an auction. The same for the actions and activities that run through there. If I look at the NFT collection, I can look at all the different actions there. We can look at actions for the app. Each one of those is unique and different depending on the type. So you don't have to keep track of which actions they are. They're quickly and easily accessible. For us, we want to mint an NFT, and there's two processes for that. I can do a general mint, which should be available right here. We also support batch minting as well. In some of the later builds, you actually see where you can give custody to other ADOs to perform these processes for you. But for us today, we're going to keep it really simple and we're going to mint. So that's going to be one NFT creation at a time. If I click this, it's going to give up a new menu set for the information and configuration for minting an NFT. Now, this is pretty much in the same setup as what we saw in the instantiation. I have a payload that should be available here for this. And I'm going to be taking a look. Let's see, we have mint values here. and hopefully this is set up correctly. I'm going to need to change the address to my address because this is from a different build that I did. So I'm just pre-configuring this. You and I could just sit down and type this out as well. I'm doing it so we can move along quickly. And essentially we've set up this mint field, and this is now taking information from IPFS. It's the data where I've loaded the metadata about this particular painting itself. So I've set this up. We're going to mint it into the crowd fund. It'll run through that simulation to let me know if there's any problem. The most common one being you've already used that token ID. We don't need to attach any funds to this because we're just minting. It'll simulate that. The fact that it gives me the broadcast indicates that it should go forward successfully. I'll get an approval message that I'll go through. And they'll quickly, see, we're doing okay. We're going to be able to get there, I think. The transaction, if I needed to confirm it, but I generally trust this system at this point in time, so I'm not going to go dive us through that. But now if we come into that auction demo example, we talked about we have those queries available, right? Well, I can open up a new query here for, say, all tokens, and now we can see there's just the same thing. I'm running a query in the same way. Panel asks me for information. These are optional, as we see here. So if I run a query, I should now get the result back saying, hey, you've minted an NFT, and that NFT is called ANDR1. So we've just gone through that process of associating the executable action. So knowing that I have an NFT that I've created, and I want to send it to an auction, all I need to do now is I'll want to know that this is the auction that I'm going to be sending it to, and I can come in and I can look to send NFT. So I'm going to send the NFT that we've minted. I currently am the owner of that. And I'm going to send the NFT, and I'm going to send it to the auction. I already had that address. I just grabbed it to put it in here, but you also can use the VFS references as well. If I believe we called it token auction, maybe. So we could use a .auction for it. And the one that we have was called ANDR1. Now, when you send an NFT, when you send a token, if you're sending it to a smart contract in general, and specifically for us with ADOs, you normally need to associate an action. What do you want me to do when I receive it? So we're sending it to an auction. I can just make a custom request without, I can build these out by hand if I want to, but since we know the type we're sending it to, I can say an auction. Well, the auction only supports a start auction message with this receive NFT. So now we get a configuration form that lets us set up information about how we want to configure the auction to occur. We're not going to use 721. I'm going to be using micro denominations, and since I'm on our chain, I'm going to use micro unit of UANDR. I can get a start time. I don't have to set a start time, but clicking that gives me a simple, easy solution to just kind of pick out the time and date that I want to work with. And if I'm lucky, let's just set this for 12:45. That'll start up at 12:45. We can see it's already set from my local time. And so that's here, hopefully within a time frame to get that started. We also have a duration when we want the auction to end. And I could do that as well for, let's say, right now. We come in. This should be, let's do it this way. I'm going to say tomorrow, today. We're going to just put 12:59. So it'll be a short window that we have available for the listing. You can set a starting bid. That's not required. You don't have to have a minimum bid, but let's say that I just want to start out with 500. And this would be a declaration of the recipient. Does someone besides me get the funds? I'm okay with saying I'm the recipient. So by default, if I disable it, I get the funds. But if I wanted to, you can really define that for someone else. You can use IBC for recovery addresses. If you want to send it on to another ADO like we just did, we can make additional builds for those as well. But to keep it simple for today, I'm going to send it to myself. Since I'm the one broadcasting, it doesn't even need to know what the wallet is. So we've tried to keep that nice and easy. If this was a private members only, we can add a whitelist. We can just add in the item and we can list every person who's authorized to engage in that. So you can actually make a private sale for this as well. So essentially what I'm doing now is I'm taking the NFT that we minted and I'm sending it over to the auction, and I'm saying, I want you to start at this time. I want you to run for about 20 minutes, and I want you to start with a minimum starting bid of 500. And that is kind of all the process. If we got this right, I told it ANDR1. Okay, so that's the one we have. And we don't need to attach any funds. And if it works, then we can now broadcast that. And we're now in the process of sending that NFT over to the auction. The auction now will have possession of that and start sale information. We can confirm that again by going into our auction, and we can go look at a query against the auction, and we should have sale information, which should be listed. Let's see. Auction state, I believe, is the query I'm looking for. Let's take a quick look. And it wants to know the auction ID. Auctions always start at 1. We've only done 1, so I know by default that it's going to equal to 1. And we can see here's that information that we configured. So that data has been updated on that auction as we sent the NFT over, and it's already set up and built that way. Now, how do we connect that to a web application? How do we make these elements go into a web application? And that's with our embeddables. So as a quick proof for our use cases, we can come in here to our embeddables. Now, I already have a couple set up, but we're going to make a new one. We're trying to make an auction. And so as I come in, it's going to say, hey, what denomination am I working on? I'm currently on our Galileo 4, so our testnet chain. And what do I want to call this? I want to call this auction demo example. We'll just give it the same name we had before. And if I want to add additional information for Twitter, banner, things like that, we're going to skip that to be quick because we'll be coming at time here. So now I can add a collection just like I did for adding information for the ADOs. I can select the types, and I've illustrated 4 different types for the use cases we have: the auction, the marketplace, the crowd fund, and the exchange. So I can build out the auction example. And when I get that, it's going to be asking me for information. It's going to say, hey, what is the auction? And here we see auction at 1.0. This is our auction. So we can give that a reference here, and we can just copy that to copy over just to be for the sake of brevity. And here, what is the NFT, the 721 collection? Well, it's going to be this one. And I can copy that over here. And so by giving that address here, and we see that we required the collection name, and we'll call it auction demo example. And so now it's typographical issues on my part. That happens when you try to present things to people. And we could give a featured token ID. If that's the case, we would say ANDR1. I'll go ahead and just skip that. And if I did this right, then it'll ask me, I can do an open preview to give a setup for what it is, but I feel pretty comfortable that this is going to work. So I'm going to actually just do a full deployment and cross my fingers. You can update this if you want to. No spaces allowed here, by the way. You can download a configuration of everything we just set up as well. So if you're self-hosting on your own outside of the system, just bring that downloaded configuration and load it up into those demo examples, and you can live host right with everything that we already configured. So now I'm going to go ahead and publish. And this is essentially going to make an update to our system saying, hey, I've tried to register an auction ADO with the name auction demo example. And I want it to be referenced to the configuration data that we just set up here. And what that's doing is it's allowing for the web application to say those ADOs that I deployed, those smart contracts that are on chain, connect them to a working auction example build. If you're doing a web app that's custom and unique, then you may need to do some custom configurations in this. But for these are about proving that the example work, and it's all open source. So you can go configure this if you like it and brand it how you would like as well. So now when I come back into my embeddables, if we've had enough time for the refresh, give it a moment to update, then we should be able to get the listing for our auction demo example that we just created. Now, if I go view that, I can see more information about it, and we can see that it's auto-linked the build, the app, and the components that we put in there. And if I open that preview, then what we just walked through in that process should have given me a build out that facilitates for me to launch that ADO on chain, similar to the auction example that we saw before. It looks like it's going slow for me, but we're going to load it up. And I'm going to go ahead and just jump in here. It's a little bit slow. Some of this is IPFS related, and I have a lower tier for free examples, which I should probably upgrade. here we go. ANDR1 of the CW721 from our embeddables auction, our auction demo example. And apparently I instantiated the wrong information because I didn't use the demo information for this picture, but from the other. We can look at that from the token URI data, which we find here, and we'll see that I didn't load the Bindo Alta VT data. So that's an operator error, but we just deployed this system, created this implementation, minted that NFT, sent it over to the auction, and we can see that it's currently live and available. You can come in to place a bid. If it already handles the wallet connections for us, so this is already set up. This is part of the build out that's available, works with the SDK, has our GraphQL implementations. We can come in and start making those bids, those setups. And that's the process of creating an app, connecting it to a web app. And as this is open source and completely configurable, these are things that you can now focus on web application development over smart contract development. If you're a smart contract developer, you can work at adding into the ADO logic library that we have, and getting we have a variety of different contribution methods that come from that. We have incentivized programs. Our economic engine actually has a usage repayment structure as well. So the more that it's used, the more that the developer will get the funds for that. And so we're really trying to encourage the communities to be looking at contributing, developing that, and accessing those systems. And I think as a general summary, to get us from one end of absolutely nothing to we have now deployed a web application that can be seen, run, and operated. And I'll go ahead and send you guys a link as a quick note. If you need funds, you can go into the ANDR faucet here within the web app at app.testnet. But we can put this up if anybody wants. They can try to go make a purchase. And hopefully that will go through. So this is built to illustrate the functionality. You really should host this separately and operate on that side. But there's a base build that we just all did together live and on the fly. And that'll close out here in about 10 minutes. So I think with that, I've got some more things that we can discuss, but I wanted to at least go ahead and check in, see where we are, see if we've had any questions, or kind of see if there's anything that anybody would like to try to dive into or get more information on.
Wow, that was really good, Leif. I mean, thank you. Do you guys have any questions? If you do, you can just write it on chat. Irfan, okay. So Tuberk asks, Leif, do I need to buy ANDR to use the app, and where can I buy it? Okay, so
all right.
So
yeah, those are
talk.
good questions. Absolutely. So if you're on the test net and you want to be working on it to see how it works, you're trying to do examples before you go to mainnet. So we're on the test net build. If we wanted to go to mainnet, we would just select to go to mainnet. When we're on test net, you'll see that the ANDR faucet will show up on the left-hand side if you're connected to the ANDR chain. So you can just grab that right there. When we open that, it'll actually say, what's your wallet address? Paste that in there. It'll give you funds. So you can testnet build this without having to buy anything. And you don't have any restriction to get in here. If you're working on one of the other chains that we support, such as Terra, Archway, Injective, you'll need to use their testnets for getting funds. And each one of those is unique. Some of them are Discord, some of them are web apps. We try to get some information in the guides of how to do that. But for Andromeda specific, make that easy. If you are trying to look to deploy on mainnet and you want to buy some ANDR, then here, just going to andromedaprotocol.io, there's a get ANDR at the top, and that gives you the different information about where you can get ANDR from as well.
I just shared the link, you guys. I mean, no financial advice, but if you want to, you can.
As far as deployments are concerned, that's a way to go.
Yeah. Irfan has raised the hand.
Yeah, hello. I got a question. So, in order to use the CLI, how advanced should a developer be?
I think that a moderate technical experience level is perfectly fine. Now we have the documentations actually walk through that quite a bit. I should have that up already. The docs will actually walk you here through the different command sets so you can get familiar with like how do we do the deployments like we were working at by using the ADO system. There's actually a help guide. So if you just learn help and -- help, you can pretty much figure out what most of the commands are in the system. Installation is often what I hear is the more complicated part for people. But we do walk you through how that happens, and we'll help troubleshoot if you're in a unique Unix build or something like that. But you shouldn't have to be a very highly technical person. I would say you want to be moderately technical, but you don't need to be like a smart contract level developer. A lot of what you see, we're a prompt-based CLI, and it works on any of the chains that we do. But that means like when we were looking at those panels and those forms that came up and it said, hey, who's the mentor and what's the name of your NFT token? It'll actually do the same thing in the CLI. It'll be a far more precise. You may want to make sure that you're familiar with that, but you can always reference those in the docs. If you're doing an auction like we were, then we'll know that the instantiation messages are going to be these particular fields. And it may come up and say, what is the authorized token address? And so, but it'll prompt you through each one of those fields, just like we did in the web application as well. I'll take the next question, and in the meantime, I may be able to switch to a CLI to just show you what that is.
Leif, Dila asks, I wanted to ask if you can walk me through the App Store. Can the devs earn from EDOs?
Yeah, so I'm currently expanding on what the App Store entails. And so the App Store is designed to be a community contributive place as well, such as the ADO structure. Currently, I'm trying to establish what the return value on that is, the complication in, say, smart contract development versus the web, the App Store is a little bit different. So we're trying to figure out what a good comp structure for that is. And in addition, I've got 3 new features coming out to make it a lot easier that I want to get out before I start handing that over to the community. Some of those are a macro system that lets you just say curly braces wallet. So you don't have to be worrying about people entering in the wallet address. It'll be whichever one's connected. Or if we're doing NFTs and other things, I've got some extended functionality that allows you to start pairing those same things together and give you a full activity. So we went through 4 processes today, right? We instantiated our ADOs, we minted the NFT, we sent it over to the auction, we set up the embeddable. And I've got the ability to actually make all 4 of those occur in one occurrence. And so what I want to do is, right now the App Store is all about the instantiation. And what I want to do is bring in the other 3 parts, because you can actually give that build so that someone can actually know exactly it's already prepared for you for each step. And I think that's going to be the key before we go into that, because we want the solution to not just be, hey, how did I create it, but to go create it, walk you through the process, make sure that we're really guiding everybody along there. And I think that's going to be a real value for the consumers. And then that makes a lot of sense for us as developers to be kind of creating these custom builds that people can kind of use as the template systems for that. I think there will be some additional pairing in future with some teams likely handling ADOs to the template development and some custom web applications as well. And I think for me, that's the biggest part that I'm most excited about, is seeing where that occurs and how that happens. This is an older version of the web app that I have on here, because I've been out of the country for about the last 5 months, but we can see more information on the later version. You can actually break into the subcommands. So like we can look at the ADO creation process, and here we see a variety of different options and availabilities. We've got other things such as, say, wallet, which we can look at adding in new wallets, how we list those. And we have a lot of information that's in there. We try to color code those in the CLI for you, but that same process that we went through, like we might come in and do an ADO create process, and it'll give you a prompt. I'm not set up. It's the older version, so as mentioned. But I think that the CLI is relatively straightforward, and we have those guides. Additionally, those guides are available with, just like we had the guides for the web apps in the docs.andromedaprotocol.io. We actually have the set up for additional information there. Let me see if I can show that here. So there's a whole section in here for Andromeda apps, walks you through those 4 use cases as well, but using the CLI. So if we wanted to come into the auction app, it'll talk about once you have the CLI already set up, then it'll come through the process and how you do that, the information to set up there, how we load that up, and the commands that you need to do for that. So it should be straightforward. We can get information about it, and there's setup guides to walk you through that.
I have a couple of other questions, I think, in the chat.
Yeah. Leif, can you see it? She or he asks, can we be able to use ERC standards in the future, and why Cosmos?
Okay, so 2 things to talk about there. Essentially the CW721 and the CW20 are the equivalents of the ERC standards. So they're actually based off those standards. They're just specifically for COSM-WASM ourselves. In fact, one of our founders was highly engaged in the development of the CW721 standard. So the reason that there's a difference, they have some degree of compatibility, but because we're working in the COSM-WASM space, we use COSM-WASM 721, but the standard itself is the equivalent. So it's the same as, say, DigitalOcean standard metadata format and other things for the token URI. We just store it on COSM-WASM. There are some technical reasons, highly technical reasons, that we think that COSM-WASM or Cosmos was specifically the better choice for us. We see a lot of the problems when we talk about, say, Ethereum and stuff like that, like the roll-ups and other solutions. We don't have to worry about that in the development space. Cosmos is really designed for multi-chain interactions as well, so bridging and other things between the different chains is a lot more flexible. We are anticipating that as the ecosystem itself improves in its ability to transfer both tokens and NFTs, that we'll be able to do some bridging of the general tokens. But we've had technical reasons. There's a growth level that we have supported here. Since we're doing an OS, it's really a big long-term vision, and these are just the first implementations of how that works. So we had to find out and make sure that we didn't have a technical limitation on the headroom of where we can grow. And that's specifically the reason that we picked Cosmos. And as we look at bridging and other things, there is a lot of compatibility that's coming into the space, and we should be able to bridge those options. That's currently not on my radar. It's handled by external groups right now. I think Axelar is a good example of that. That's kind of handling that multi-ecosystem bridging. And there's a couple other resources out there. So we'll be bringing that out. We've got multi-chain solutions that we'll be introducing over the next few months. I'm in the stage of testing and confirmations before I get into the rollouts on that. But there's a lot of things that are coming out in that sense, over the summer and into the fall as well. So we've got a lot of technological solutions that we're expanding on rapidly. And I'm really just trying to kind of cross the T's. It's not the old school way anymore of get it out fast and fix it later. We have to be a little more meticulous, which sometimes is frustrating. So hopefully that answered your question.
All right.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Leif. Before we end this, you can just Leif and Angela, you can just plug in your socials, and everyone can follow you as well. I want to paste the Andromeda's.
Oops, that didn't link.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, that's not a link. Yeah.
No, 1 second. Sorry about that. That's a link.
There we go.
Mm.
And feel free to reach out as well. If you have follow-up questions, need some support, we're always trying to engage our community. So if what we had today was enough that you get hungry and then you feel lost, or you have questions, want to know where things are, I encourage you to just reach out to the team, and we'll do our best to try and get you further information and support as well. And
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, go ahead, Leif.
you can find all those links at andromedaprotocol.io under Connect, and then get connected with us there.
Even faster. Thank you. We appreciate it. Khan and Ryzen team, thank you so much. We appreciate you giving us this opportunity to share AOS with you. We really do welcome all your questions, as Leif said, and we hope to do this again soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Thanks.
I'm going to stop the recording right now.